where I worked, everyone was required to conceal their identity from the world. I was part of a secret organization called U.Z.Z, an organization dedicated to saving the world from supernatural forces. I'm obviously pretty resigned with the supernatural. Not much can really scare me these days. Except for one incident in particular, that is. The one that encouraged me to make the decision to finally leave the place once and for all. I'll start off with describing the uniforms, as they are vital to what will occur later. The standard agents wear armored gray shirts, a black utility belt, dark gray pants, and dress shoes, finishing off with a large pair of black shades. The higher-ups, like me, are able to customize their uniforms to an extent. I'm a first-class agent, so I wear a suit that's colored in whichever color I please, along with a black utility belt, black sunglasses, and black dress shoes. There's also Special Agent Ray, the commander of the standard agents, who wears a blue tuxedo and black dress shoes with the same shades. Professor wears typical scientist garb and changed daily. Wears a red sweater under a black tux and black dress shoes. You get the point, I'm sure. And I could describe the clothes in more detail, but that's not the purpose of what I'm trying to convey. For the most part, every standard agent wears the same uniform, which is pretty normal until you realize something pretty unusual. Every single one of the standard agents look the exact same. Okay, and I'm not talking about their uniforms here. The facial and body structure is consistent, alongside the hair being in the exact same style. It just feels so uncanny how so many people can look consistent to one another without any familial relations. I always try to bury any skepticism in the back of my head, knowing my job is more vital than any conspiracy theory from my imagination, you know? And for the past few years, I've managed to be very competent with my job. I mean, my payroll has expanded, for one. I've got a girlfriend, and none of my dubious beliefs have been unearthed. Until now, that is. A couple nights ago, it was slightly after midnight. I was about to head home until Professor approached me for something. I was hesitant to accept his request, considering all the times he put me through unnecessary crap. However, I accepted his offer. I need you to go down in the basement. There's some boxes of lab equipment that I need you to grab, he asked. I started to head towards the elevator and enter the basement before he halted me. "Wait," he exclaimed. "Whatever you do, don't go anywhere past the metal walls." I was somewhat suspicious of his warning, but I simply shrugged it off. I went down to the basement and began to scavenge for the equipment. Now, a little bit of background. The basements of U.Z.Z are built rather strangely. The metal walls were built around the entrance and didn't extend too far. Beyond the walls were a cavern. I've never seen it due to the consistent warnings Professor instilled within me. Why they couldn't just close off the walls during construction is beyond me. And after I had gathered all the boxes, I carried them back to the elevator. However, once I had gotten there, its doors wouldn't open. I groaned in annoyance and slammed the door with my fist. "Stupid old piece of shit," I cursed under my breath. Now I was trapped in the basement until someone came to retrieve me. And I pulled out my phone to call Professor. Of course, the ditz didn't pick up my call. I sat down next to the door in resignation, just hoping that the elevator would function again or that someone would find me. My perturbed thoughts were interrupted by the growling of my stomach. I hadn't eaten dinner yet, so I decided to search around for a vending machine. There was one that laid on the edge of the metal walls and slightly dipped into the cavern. I walked over to the vending machine and popped in a couple of quarters, chose some snacks alongside a soda. I glanced out into the cavern as I waited for my food. The cavern, it looked like any other. Stalagmites, rock formations, and gorgeous crystals. You name it. The only off-putting detail was a neon blue light reflecting on the rocks in the cavern. And at first I thought that it was simply the lights within the metal walls, but they were white lights, and the light seemed to be originating from within the cavern. My curiosity piqued. I desired to know what could possibly be in that cavern. I wanted to regain some of my energy before exploring the cavern, so I began to devour some of my snacks and one of my sodas. I continued to stare into the cavern as I ate. Professor Heeds had exited my mind as I pondered about what could be inhabiting this cave. I finished up my food and cautiously walked into the cavern. I carried my flashlight and kept my gun and phone on hand as I explored. Something strange I noticed was that there was a pathway. It was perfectly made and exempt of any protruding objects. It intrigued me on why there was a pathway here if seemingly nobody was allowed to enter the cavern. The pathway eventually led me to multiple stacks of boxes. The ones in the back were caked in dust and presumably abandoned, while the ones in front looked to be more recently placed. And on one of the boxes was a uniform. Precisely the standard agent's uniform. It was folded up neatly with the shoes on top. It looked to be in perfect quality, just unused. I was confused on why it radiated with, and it was such an unsettling feel to me. It was probably just a spare uniform and nothing else, but something felt strange about it. I disregarded the uniform and continued down the cavern. The light became brighter and bolder as I traveled. And soon enough, I had arrived at the source. My curiosity quickly shifted to horror at the sight. There were at least 4 large, cylindrical tubes filled with a strange blue liquid. Nothing but the liquid was within the tubes. However, one of them on the end was broken. The glass was shattered and liquid was all over the ground. I froze in complete, utter terror at the sight. So many questions were swirling through my head. What were those tubes doing here? Why were they hidden from us? And most importantly, what were those tubes intended to contain? I couldn't handle all of the questions that I was asking myself and wanted to examine the tubes a little closer. I took a step forward and a small sound emerged. It sounded like dead leaves. I looked down to see an entire skeleton beneath me. I leaped back in fright, covering my mouth so I wouldn't scream or vomit. I looked down to the skeleton. It looked human enough, with some abnormalities. Besides the arm I had just broken off, it looked clean, with some rotten remains of skin and hair, covered with cobwebs at the bottom. Its legs looked to be fused together, with dozens of toes at the end. The sockets were huge and the jaw was extended to the ground. It looked human, okay, but at the same time, almost like an alien. Never once in my life did I ever encounter anything like it. I continued to look at the skeleton before a blood-curdling screech went into the air. It sounded almost like a mix of an infant's crying and gargling. I ducked behind a large stack of boxes. I heard footsteps approaching. I crouched down and turned off my flashlight, anticipating whatever was advancing down the cavern. I peeked through one of the gaps within the boxes, wanting to see what could possibly be out there. And then I saw it. It was almost like the skeleton, except it had different features. It had a strong torso build. No muscles, though. I could see its ribs right through its skin. On its shoulders were two non-functional heads that looked like they had been melted into the shoulders. The main head had large, bulging black eyes, almost like a bug's eyes, alongside an elongated jaw that reached down to its stomach. It was shirtless and barefoot, only wearing a pair of dark gray pants that also looked to be melted on. It didn't have arms, instead, tentacle-esque appendages with groups of fingers on it. It was a disgusting creature, to put it short. I held my breath, watching in utter terror as it surveyed the area, just praying that it would leave soon. When it finally did, I was relieved, yet I remained paranoid. I wasn't leaving just yet until I knew that thing was completely out of the area. And once I had gathered up the courage, I rushed out from the boxes and ran back through the pathway from where I had come. I rushed back to the metal walls and to the elevator. Thankfully, the elevator was functioning properly, and I placed the boxes inside before entering it myself. Once I had stopped at the floor where Professor's lab was, I placed the boxes there and left home. I had intense trouble sleeping that night. The creature haunted my nightmares. I couldn't stop thinking about it, and it was deteriorating my mental health. I contemplated quitting for a while, but that would cause too much suspicion, alongside not having a proper alibi. Soon enough, though, my alibi had come to me, thanks to recent events. I'm not proud or overjoyed to use it, but I have no other choice. Things were getting too dangerous around here as well for me to keep going. Special Agent Ray had died. And I would quit out of grief.